In my setting, my D&D setting, there is a specific category of beings. You have the planar bound, and you have the fey bound. And the fey bound are actually quite a large, diverse race of beings that don't just include elves like they would in most settings. In fact, actually, dwarves, gnomes, elves, and orcs are all fey bound. At the beginning of everything, like, the material plane sits sandwiched between the Shadowfell and the Feywild, and in the Feywild are the Feybound races, and every now and then, different races will immigrate to the material plane. Nobody really knows why, mostly because I haven't figured it out yet, but they do. And the very first few races that immigrated was the dwarves. And when they immigrated, the most dominant race in the material plane at the time were the dragons. And so a large conflict ensued eventually between the dwarves and the dragons, and eventually that died out, where the dragons just sort of vanished and nobody knows what happened, and the dwarves sort of stumbled into antiquity. Then the elves showed up, as well as the gnomes, and the elves sort of took over most of the galaxy and the universes, and then eventually the orcs showed up, and they were like, okay, well, we want to do some exploration and conquering, but the elves already did all that. We want to do that too. And so they started getting in conflicts with the elves. And then eventually, you got the little gnomes were off doing their own thing, And then finally, the very last race of Feybound creatures eventually showed up, called the Eladrin, which just are the most recent. Like, they have existed only for about 100 years at this point in this universe, and they are and every time, every few hundred years that a race has existed in the material plane, they lose their feyness and they become part of the material, because they are now attaching some of that darkness from the Shadowfell that also bleeds into the material plane, and they are no longer becoming just the Fey. The dwarves have existed for so long that they are like 50, they are as close to the material as a human or a dragonborn or any other material plane race. The dwarves are, by any account, no longer Feyborn, even though they are native to the Fey at one time in their existence. And the opposite end, the Eladrin, are so different from every other race, personality-wise, metaphysically, that no other race can really comprehend what is going on in their head. They are different. Their headspace is so completely different. They call them childish, but that's just because they're full of so much energy, it just isn't comprehensible.